The first time the alien student saw Owen Nells take a wrench to the thigh was during a maintenance demonstration aboard the Intercultural Engineering Exchange vessel, Galileo's Wake. It was supposed to be a routine systems calibration on the ship's grav stabilizer array. Nothing fancy. Nothing dangerous. Just a bunch of interspecies engineering students watching a human technician guide them through the quirks of magnetic coil alignment. The wrench hadn't even been in his hand. It fell from a poorly secured storage shelf 3 meters above, bounced off the edge of the diagnostic panel, and slammed into Owen's leg with a dull, wet thud that echoed through the maintenance bay. Owen yelped, staggered back, and leaned heavily on the wall. His jeans darkened around the impact site, and he hissed through clenched teeth. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, don't crowd me," he said, raising a hand toward the approaching cluster of alien students. Jarek, a lanky student from the gas giant colony of Vesker, froze mid-step. His bluish skin paled a few shades. "Your leg is ruptured," Jarek said, his voice rising. "You are leaking." "I'm not leaking," Owen muttered, lowering himself onto the floor. "It's just a bruise." "Feels like a nasty one, though." Another student, a short crystalline being named Luro, blinked rapidly. "You are clearly injured. Protocol demands suspension of all activity. You require immediate regenerative immersion." "I don't need a regen pod," Owen said through gritted teeth. "I just need to ice it." Luro tilted his translucent head. "You intend to apply frozen water?" "Yeah, you know, ice, cold pack, reduces swelling." Jarek's limbs fluttered nervously. "You must cease all function. That is our protocol on Vesker." "An injury of that magnitude requires at least 5 days in stasis. Your tissue integrity may be compromised." "Well, we humans don't do stasis for a bruise." Owen sucked in a breath as he rolled up his pant leg. The skin was already turning a deep, angry purple with a jagged edge of swelling spreading outward. "Though, this might be a bit worse than I thought." He tried to stand but grimaced and sat back down. Luro stepped forward. "You cannot continue work in this state." "You are clearly compromised." "I said I'm icing it," Owen snapped. "I'll be fine." He pulled a small thermal pack from his tool belt, shook it, and slapped it against the bruised thigh. The pack activated with a soft hiss, and a thin frost formed on the outside. The alien student stared in silence. Owen closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cool wall behind him. "Give me 10 minutes, then we'll finish the calibration." "You intend to resume physical labor?" Jarek asked, astonished. "I didn't get hit in the brain," Owen said. "Just the leg." "But the impact force was sufficient to contuse internal tissues. Your dermis is bruised. Yeah, I know how it works." For a minute, nobody moved. Then Jarek turned to Luro and whispered, "Are all humans like this?" "I do not know," Luro whispered back. "I heard one once stapled his own hand and continued typing." "That is not adaptive. That is madness." Owen cracked one eye open. "I can hear you." They fell silent again. The demonstration resumed 20 minutes later with Owen limping slightly but walking on his own. He kept the ice pack tucked into his waistband, repositioning it occasionally as he explained the nuances of gravitic feedback loops. After the session, Jarek approached him hesitantly. "You require evaluation. I can accompany you to the medbay." Owen waved him off. "I'll go later." "Need to finish the reports first." Jarek stared at him in disbelief. "You are prioritizing documentation over bodily integrity." "It's a bruise. It hurts, yeah, but I can still function." "Look, I'll get it scanned before dinner." Later that evening, he did limp into the medbay, where the ship's automated scanner confirmed there was no fracture, just significant soft tissue damage. The attending medic, a grizzled Terran named Elsie, handed him a compression sleeve and a stronger ice pack. "You'll hobble for a few days," she said. "Try not to lift anything heavier than a spanner." "Noted," Owen replied. The next morning, when Owen walked into the classroom with a slight limp, Jarek's eyes widened. "You are still ambulatory?" Jarek asked. "Yeah, it's sore but manageable." Luro leaned over. "I do not understand." "Your pain response must be suppressed." Nope, trust me, I feel it. The day's lesson involved recalibrating the ship's oxygen scrubbers, a task that required crawling into tight maintenance ducts. Owen hesitated at the entrance of the first duct, then sighed and climbed in, dragging his legs slowly. Jarek practically vibrated with anxiety. He is worsening his condition. He is deteriorating, Luro nodded. We must report this to the coordinator. Owen's muffled voice echoed from inside the duct. Guys, I'm not dying, I'm just sore. For the next week, Owen continued to work, albeit more slowly. He took breaks, iced the leg religiously, and avoided lifting, but he never stopped. The bruise started to fade from purple to greenish yellow, and by the 8th day, he walked without limping. But the incident didn't fade from the students' minds. Jarek began compiling notes. Luro submitted a behavioral study proposal to his home university. Other students, previously shy around Owen, now watched him with a mix of awe and unease. 2 weeks later, Owen led a field simulation on emergency hull breach protocols. Midway through, one of the Vescorian students dropped a panel segment on his own foot. The student screamed, panicked, and immediately demanded a stasis chamber. Owen rushed over, checking for fractures. It's not broken, you just pinched a nerve. But the pain, the student wailed. I cannot function like this, you'll be okay. Just breathe. The others watched as Owen applied pressure to the foot, then helped the student lie back. He handed over a cold pack and sat with him until the pain subsided. Later, in the debriefing room, Luro leaned toward Jarek. He did not even flinch when his own leg turned purple. But he sat with our classmate for 20 minutes to comfort him. Jarek nodded slowly. He is resilient, but also considerate. Terrifyingly so. That evening, Owen sat alone in the mess hall, poking at a tray of rehydrated pasta when Jarek approached. We have a question, he said. Owen looked up. Shoot. Is it common for your species to endure injury without rest? Injury? No, we rest, but bruises, cuts, stuff like that, we usually just work around them. Even when in pain, Owen shrugged. Pain doesn't always mean stop. Sometimes it just means be careful. Jarek sat down across from him. That is unsettling, Owen chuckled. Yeah, well, we're used to patching ourselves up and getting on with it. Luro joined them a moment later. I have begun cataloging your species as moderately alarming. I'll put that on my resume, Owen said, lifting his fork. The next week, the class visited a mining outpost on the lunar station of Ardent Roman 4. The terrain was harsh, gravity uneven, and the work grueling. On the second day, a tremor shook the outpost, sending Owen sprawling into a metal girder. He struck his shoulder hard, and this time he didn't get up right away. Jarek knelt beside him. You are injured again, Owen groaned, clutching his arm, shoulder. Think I hit the joint. We must scan for dislocation. A portable scanner confirmed it wasn't dislocated, just badly bruised. Still, Owen's face was pale and he winced with every movement. I'm gonna sit this one out, he muttered, slumping against the wall. Nobody argued. The alien students moved carefully around him. Jarek took over leading the exercise. Luro monitored seismic activity. They kept checking on Owen, bringing him water and updates. For the next 2 days, he remained on light duty. By the time they returned to the ship, the shoulder had improved enough for Owen to sleep comfortably again. The leg bruise had faded entirely. During the final presentation of the semester, Jarek included a section titled Human Pain Tolerance and Behavioral Curiosities. Luro presented a comparative chart labeled Healing Time vs. Refusal to Rest. Owen sat in the back, arms crossed, a faint smile on his face. When it ended, the coordinator, a stern but fair diplomat named Sava, approached him. Your methods are unconventional. Just doing what works, Owen said. Your resilience has made an impression. But so has your stubbornness. Stubborn's just commitment with bad timing. Sava blinked slowly. I will remember that. After the closing ceremony, Jarek approached Owen one last time. We have learned much from your presence. Not merely about engineering, but about function under duress. Owen stood, shoulder still stiff. And I've learned that not all students panic when someone gets a bruise, just most of them. Luro stepped up beside Jarek. We still believe your reaction was reckless. I probably should have sat down longer, but bruises don't kill you. On Vesker they might, Jarek said. Owen laughed. Well, I'm glad you guys stuck around long enough to see me heal. Jarek extended a hand, awkwardly mimicking the human handshake. Owen clasped it. Farewell, Owen Nells, Jarek said. Next time I'll wear a helmet, Owen replied. The aliens paused. For your leg? Luro asked. No, Owen said. For the wrench. The corridor outside the propulsion lab reeked faintly of ozone and thermal gel. Owen leaned against the bulkhead, elbow propped just above the access hatch, waiting for the newest round of interns to finish fumbling with the auxiliary coolant valves. They'd been at it for nearly half an hour. Most of the human instructors had given up and gone to lunch, but Owen stayed, mostly out of boredom, partially because one of the students had routed a bypass line through a vent duct that definitely wasn't designed for fluid transport. Inside, a loud clank echoed, followed by a sharp hiss. Then a voice called out, trembling slightly. The seal is not responding to the override. Owen knocked twice on the wall. You reverse the polarity on the actuator, open the panel and flip the orientation on the blue relay. There was a pause, then a flurry of movement. A bulbous head poked out of the hatch. It belonged to Egrid, a third-cycle student from the Norvax Dominion whose species resembled a cross between a sea sponge and a bagpipe. Egrid's 3 eyes blinked independently. The blue one? Yeah, not the green one. Unless you want to flush the chamber and evacuate the bay. I do not wish to do that. Good instinct. Owen tilted his head. You all right in there? Egrid's skin rippled faintly. I am experiencing mild anxiety. Your instructions are extremely casual for a situation involving active pressure lines. They're just coolant conduits. If you mess up, worst case, you get sprayed with refrigerant. Won't kill you, might sting a bit. Might sting. It's happened to me twice. You'll be fine. Wear gloves. Egrid vanished back inside. Owen adjusted the strap of his tool sling and glanced down the corridor. The rhythmic hum of the ship's propulsion core pulsed through the deckplate, steady, reassuring. He rubbed his shoulder absently, still a little stiff from the impact last week. The med tech had offered to run another scan, but he'd waved it off. It didn't click when he moved, which meant it wasn't serious. A sharp metallic pop rang out from the access hatch, followed by a gurgling noise that made Owen's eyebrows rise. Update, Egrid. I have corrected the relay. The valve is responding. Also, I am slightly damp. Did you get sprayed? Yes, it is cold. You'll live. I am not convinced of that. Owen crouched and reached into the hatch, dragging Egrid out by the shoulder harness. The alien's outer membrane was slick with clear fluid, which steamed slightly on contact with the warmer ambient air. Don't touch your eyes. That stuff's not toxic, but it'll irritate mucous membranes. I do not have mucous membranes. Then you're ahead of the game. Egrid sagged against the wall, squelching faintly. You continue to underestimate how alarming your lack of urgency is. That's not true. I just don't panic. You were injured recently. You continued to function. Now you stand calmly while I am soaked in synthetic coolant. Owen handed him a towel from the emergency cabinet. You want a medal or a dry shirt? Egrid stared at the towel, then slowly patted himself dry. I would like a dry shirt. Laundry chutes 2 corridors down, right side, labeled in 4 languages, can't miss it. Egrid hesitated. If I leave, the others may reroute the flow incorrectly again. I'll watch them. You are not on duty. I'm bored. Egrid gave a faint gurgle, which Owen had come to understand was a Norvaxy equivalent of resignation. He shuffled off, towel draped over his shoulder. Inside the hatch, 2 more students were elbow-deep in the junction array. One was a tall, jointed being with a neck like a crane arm. The other had tentacles instead of fingers and a tendency to mutter in a language the ship's translator still struggled with. All right, Owen said, ducking his head inside. Let's see what you broke. The tentacled one looked up, eyes wide. We did not break it, we merely altered the flow path. You bypassed the thermal buffer entirely. That's not an alteration, that's a shortcut to an explosion. The tall one chirped defensively. We were improvising. Don't improvise with propulsion systems, that's how people get spaced. There was a beat of silence. Spaced? The tall one asked. Ejected. Into vacuum. That is a punishment, it's a consequence, not always voluntary. The tentacled one shivered. Your species employs such methods? No, but systems fail. I've seen coolant lines rupture and take out half a bay, you want to avoid that. The tall one tilted its head. Yet you remain unalarmed. I don't see any smoke, you're still breathing, it's fine. You do not fear malfunctions. I respect them, that's why I fix them. The tentacled student extended a tendril toward the relay. May I attempt a correction? Owen nodded. Go ahead. Just don't cross the green and yellow lines. That'll trip the failsafe. As they worked, Owen leaned back against the wall and pulled a protein bar from his belt pouch. It was supposed to taste like almonds. It didn't. He chewed it anyway. 15 minutes later, the system gave a cheerful chime and the junction lights turned blue. Nice, Owen said. That's stable. The tall one chirped again, this time with something approaching pride. We succeeded. You did. Next time, don't reroute without checking the schematics. Understood. They filed out, leaving Owen alone by the hatch. He sat down, stretching out his legs. The propulsion hum had shifted slightly, indicating the flow redistribution was taking effect. He popped his neck and closed his eyes for a moment. Footsteps approached. Not heavy but deliberate. You are not scheduled to supervise this session. He opened one eye. A slender alien with iridescent plating stood above him. Paul, one of the advanced interns, always formal, always watching. Didn't say I was supervising, Owen said. Just didn't feel like leaving. Paul crouched beside him. You are favoring your left shoulder. Noticed, huh? It is subtle, but present, it's healing. You declined further medical attention. No point. I already know what they'll say. Paul's eyes narrowed. You presume to override medical evaluation. I'm not overriding anything. I'm just familiar with how my body handles contusions. You are not a physician. No, but I've had enough injuries to know when I need help and when I don't. Paul stared at him for a long moment. You have sustained many injuries. You don't work maintenance for 10 years without collecting a few, and you always return to function without delay. I give myself time when I need it. This one didn't need it. Paul tilted his head. Your standards are ill-defined. They're personalized. That is not efficient. It works for me. Paul stood. Your tolerance for dysfunction is astonishing. Owen shrugged with his good shoulder. You get used to it. Later that evening, the propulsion bay logs flagged an anomaly. Owen went to investigate, expecting a sensor glitch. Instead, he found Paul kneeling beside the same junction array, dissecting the relay setup with methodical precision. You're not on shift, Owen said. I am reviewing the earlier configuration. I wish to understand your corrections. He stepped closer. You're redoing the work. I am analyzing the decision flow. I have compared your response time and procedural deviation to standard protocols. Your methods diverge significantly. They get the job done. They rely heavily on instinct. I call it experience. Paul glanced up. I observed your response latency. You did not hesitate. Even when Egrid was exposed to coolant. That wasn't an emergency. According to Dominion protocols, it qualified as one. Owen sighed. I'm not Dominion trained, clearly. They worked in silence for a while, side by side. Paul calibrated the diagnostics. Owen double-checked the coolant pressure. Eventually, Paul spoke again. You are difficult to categorize. Not my problem. It complicates analysis. You analyzing me now. I have been since your first injury. Fascinating. Paul turned, eyes sharp. Your behavior suggests a disregard for personal damage. I don't disregard it, I just manage it differently. You normalize it. I adapt. Paul studied him. I will need to revise several models. Glad I could help. Paul nodded once, then returned to his work. Owen left the bay without another word. He didn't limp anymore, but the shoulder still ached if he moved too fast. He'd ice it later. The propulsion diagnostics lab was unusually quiet the following afternoon. Not silent, never silent. Not with the ever-present low churn of the ship's systems, but the usual buzz of overlapping conversations was absent. Owen sat on a crate beside the open panel of the pulse modulator assembly, hands resting on his knees, watching the students work in controlled silence. There were 7 of them today, all alien. No fellow humans on this shift. He didn't mind sometimes. It was easier not having to explain why he was wearing a compression sleeve under his jumpsuit. His shoulder was healing, but movement still tugged oddly if he reached too far overhead. So he didn't. Across the room, a 2-limbed creature with a flattened head carefully inserted a relay chip into the diagnostics console. Its name was Truv. Owen hadn't interacted much with Truv before today, but he'd heard about the species Neirodians known for precise work and a rigid cultural aversion to improvisation. "Are you certain," Truv asked without turning, "that this component is compatible with the existing framework?" "It's an adaptive relay," Owen replied. "It'll calibrate itself to the power load. There is no documentation of that within the ship's database. I brought it from Earth." "I tested it 3 times. Truv paused. "You trust your personal experience over formal documentation. When I've built the thing myself, yeah, I know what it's made of." Another student, a hexaptal being from the Chaskari system, glanced up from the floor. "What if it fails under load? Then we shut down the array and switch back to the old one. This seems risky." "It's controlled risk. That's how you improve systems." Truv slowly removed its hand from the console and stepped back. "Neirodians are trained to eliminate all risk before implementation. I'm not Neirodian. That has become evident." Owen stood, joints slightly stiff, and walked over. "Let me show you something." He tapped the console, pulling up the relay's diagnostic interface. "This chart right here shows voltage regulation. If it spiked, we'd already see it. But the test duration has been too short. You want a longer sample? Fine." He leaned down, tapped a command. "We'll run it for 20 minutes. Live monitoring." Truv folded its limbs in what Owen had come to recognize as a stance of reluctant compliance. As the minutes passed, the student group gradually relaxed. One of the Chaskari adjusted the thermal stabilizers. A smaller, winged student from the outer colonies cleaned the contact points with practiced patience. Owen watched in measured silence, occasionally offering a correction or an alternate method. He only stepped in when someone reached for the wrong fuse bank. At the 10-minute mark, Truv spoke again. "You demonstrate confidence even when uncertain. That's not confidence, that's familiarity. You do not appear apprehensive even when outcomes are variable. I've had enough variable outcomes to know they're survivable." Truv tilted its head. "You have experienced equipment failure?" Owen let out a quiet laugh. "Plenty. Once had a power junction blow out 3 meters from my face, singed my eyebrows, melted part of my sleeve, still finished the job." There was a subtle shift in the room, not fear exactly, but a kind of recalibration. The students exchanged glances. The winged one stopped cleaning. "You continued working during a fire?" it asked. "There was no fire, just a burn and a little smoke. Fire suppression kicked in." "You remained in the area?" "Had to." "If I left, the containment seal could have failed." Truv stared at him. "That is not a standard response." "No, but it was the right one." Truv looked down at its hands. "Neirodians are removed from duty for 1 cycle after exposure to high heat events." "Sounds nice." "I got a new pair of gloves and a pat on the back." "Was that sufficient compensation?" "I wasn't looking for compensation. I just didn't want the section to blow. Human priorities are." "Difficult to model." "Welcome to the club." The console beeped softly, indicating the relay test had passed stability thresholds. Truv stepped forward and examined the data. Its expression was unreadable: no eyebrows, no shifting pupils, but its posture loosened. "The results are within acceptable limits." Told you. I still do not understand why you risked introducing it without full documentation. You're not always going to have manuals. Best get used to thinking on your feet. We do not possess feet. You know what I mean. Truv turned toward the others. The relay is viable. Proceed with Phase 2. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Owen returned to his crate and sat down again. He flexed his shoulders slowly, testing the range. Better than yesterday, still not perfect. He'd give it one more day before lifting anything heavier than his own weight. The winged student fluttered over, perching lightly on the table. Do all humans have such stories? Of burns and damage and repair, not everyone, but most of us who work in engineering have a few. Have you ever been incapacitated? Owen thought for a moment. Once, broke my hand falling off a scaffold, couldn't grip anything for 3 weeks. May do with the other one. You continued working? I was on light duty. Inventory diagnostics still showed up. The student's wings twitched. I broke a wing once, was grounded for 2 months, no work permitted. Yeah, see, that makes sense. You guys use your wings to move around. I could still walk. You describe limitation like a puzzle to solve. That's what it is. What if the solution is rest? Then I rest, but only when it's necessary. The student tilted its head. How do you know when it is? Owen smiled. When I can't fix it with tape or ice. Across the room, Truv called out. The Phase 2 calibration is ready. Owen stood and walked over, keeping his movements steady. No limp, no wince. He leaned over the display, checked the input. Looks good, let's cycle it. No more than 20% load at first. As the system came online, the students watched the numbers climb. Stable, clean, no flickers. After a few minutes, Truv exhaled. The upgrade is functioning. Good work. Truv turned to him. You were correct. That happened a lot. I will not tell others, Owen laughed. Fair enough. They ran the cycle for another hour, gradually increasing the load. Nothing failed. When it was done, Owen logged the results and authorized the component for temporary use pending full integration. At the end of the shift, he met Egrid in the corridor outside the lab. The Nerodian was dry this time and carrying a data slab. You did not mention your prior injury before today, Egrid said. No reason to. You endured thermal exposure and mechanical damage. Why minimize it? Because it's done. No point in dragging it around. I believe your attitude confuses many of us. I'm okay with that. Egrid nodded slowly. You prioritize function even under strain. I prioritize solving the problem. Everything else is just noise. I am beginning to understand. Good. Maybe next time you won't panic when someone gets sprayed. I did not panic. I became alert. Same thing, buddy. Egrid's eyes blinked in sequence. I will recalibrate my definition. They reached the junction where the corridor split. Egrid turned left. Owen continued straight, back in his quarters. Owen peeled off the compression sleeve and rotated his shoulder in slow circles. The ache was dull now, manageable. He sat on the edge of his bunk, reached for his tablet and logged the day's report. In the notes section, he added one line. Relay functioning. Students adapting. He leaned back against the wall, satisfied. He'd ice the shoulder again before bed just to keep the swelling down. But tomorrow, he wouldn't need the sleeve, and he doubted any of the students would flinch if he showed up with a bruise.